the BMW R18 worth all the hype? Let's talk about that. Let's get cracking. Good moto morning. Welcome to another episode of Kraken's Garage. Today on Kraken's Garage, we're going to discuss, is the R18 worth all the hype that led up to its debut of this bike? And I'll share some thoughts on my owner experience very early in the relationship. So the honeymoon's still on right now, but I'll share a few thoughts on what this bike is trying to be and where it's trying to go and why BMW put it out. So let's get to it. There's literally hundreds of videos on this bike out on YouTube, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on stats and specs on this bike. I will review a couple of them and share my thoughts on them. Some iconic ones, that gigantic behemoth motor. It weighs 244 pounds. I have never seen such a beast in my entire life. The seat height is 27.2 inches off from the ground. To put that into perspective, that is a little under 3 inches shorter than what a Honda Grom is offering at 30 inches. Has a claimed weight of 760 pounds. Gas tank holds 4.2 US gallons. I'm averaging about 140 miles before my low fuel level light kicks on. If you ride all the way to empty, you can go about 170 miles consistently. And that's quite a bit more than what other people are. So I guess people are romping on the motor and squashing their fuel mileage on this particular bike. Bike has 91 horsepower and 116 foot-pounds of torque. 1,802 cc's, each cylinder is 901 cc's. That's a freaking anvil of a coffee can pumping back and forth. I will say, when I start out a relationship with any bike, when I stab the starter button, do I giggle? Do I smile? With this bike, most definitely. It has oodles of character. I'm only speaking about the first edition or the first release or variant of this bike. They have since come out with a classic with bags and a windshield and a full dresser with bags. Please bear in mind my thoughts are only on this particular model. This particular one is what's known as the first edition package. It's the base model, and the first edition package has the iconic dual white pinstripes that are hand painted on. Plus it has the chrome package, and never before have I seen a BMW have so much chrome. We'll talk about that in a minute. It also has the premium package, which has hill start control, headlight pro, fancy term for their version of an LED headlight. It has reverse assist, adaptive headlight that's active at 7 degrees, lean and above 7 miles per hour. It illuminates the inside of the curbs for lean angles up to 25 degrees. This one also has the select package, which sells for $225. That includes the anti-theft alarm system, lockable fuel cap, and heated grips. By the way, the premium package is $1,450. Passenger seating package, which includes his back pad plus pegs for the pinion, at $250. Standard on the bike is a standard toolkit, a 6-speed ASC automatic stability control, ABS, dynamic brake control, 3 4-piston calipers that are Brembo brakes, covered in a chromium BMW shell. Has LED all the way around. It has a minimalistic gauge on it, and we'll talk about that in just a second, that offers different information on the bike. It has spoked wheels, which I happen to love, torque control assist, proximity key, electronic immobilizer, anti-hopping clutch, shaft drive, 3-year, 36,000 mile warranty. The front tire is a 120/70 R19 and the rear tire is a 180/65 B16. It has that double cradle chassis, which harkens from bikes of the old /5. This bike revs out pretty quickly, right around 5,500 RPM. The bike is violently going down the road. It is not an enjoyable ride. Its happy place is between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM. It reaches max torque at 3,000 RPM. There's no need to wind it out. This is a tractor of a motorcycle. It's like riding a rhinoceros. To put that into perspective, at 70 miles per hour, that it tacks out about 2,550 RPMs. The wheelbase on it is 1,731 millimeters, or roughly 68.1 inches. To put that into perspective, the longest wheelbase wheelbase that Harley-Davidson ever made was on the Breakout at 1,695 millimeters or 66.7 inches. This bike is longer than the longest Harley ever made. Longer bikes usually fare well for taller riders. I have been hexed my whole life. Same with other tall riders out there, Harley Throttle Juice, Big Bert. These are tall gentlemen, and you have to jam yourself on most bikes with very little leg room, and it's a matter of how bad, not a matter of how good. So for me, this is a treat to ride a bike like this. To put it in Kraken's perspective, if you asked the Germans or BMW to build a Harley-Davidson wide glide, this is what you're looking at. And this is a direct transition for me over from the wide glide to this bike. The reason why I say the wide glide is because the rake on the front end is 32.7 degrees. Most Harley-Davidson softtails are 30 degrees. In the case of my wide glide, or in the case of the Breakout, at slow speed maneuvers with that rake and that skinny front tire on the wide glide, the bike wants to dip in the turns. Its manners are much more pleasant at speed. This bike, believe it or not, with that bigger front tire and that long rake on the front, it actually is very easy to ride. It's very forgiving in the slow speed maneuvers as well, but it's not a happy camper at high speeds. You get above 80, 90 miles an hour, it is not fun to ride. Nor was my wide glide, nor is the Breakout. And yes, I have ridden them both, especially the wide glide. It's not designed for that, so people need to pipe down about bashing this bike. But you know, I think BMW owners for the last 30, 40 years have enjoyed cutting edge technology. And every iteration that they come out has more tech on it, more engineering on it, and performs better than the last one. That's historically the way BMW has gone. This one is a step in the other direction. This is going back to their roots, and I'll throw some pictures up here to give you some styling cues of where this bike's DNA comes from. In 1937, they came out with BMW came out with a /7, or an R7, I should say, that was a concept bike that was built for speed. It never went into production. Oddly enough, there's a wonderful story behind that bike. It was recently uncovered 70 years later and restored, and it's now on display. It's almost an Art Deco look type of bike when you look at it. But when you see that giant bulbous fishtail muffler, you see where this bike's DNA comes from. Same with the frame. The frame also follows the lines down here to give it that softtail look like Harley-Davidson does with that monoshock look. It actually is designed to make it look like a hardtail. My favorite item on the entire bike is the shaft drive. That is nickel plated, and that design was being used in the 30s, and BMW found a way to incorporate it in 2021 and 2022. I freaking love it. It is a rolling piece of art. Until you stand next to this bike or sit on one, you don't realize how heavy or how big a bike it is. It is a behemoth of a bike. It is huge. Again, it is like riding a rhinoceros down the road. When you snap that throttle, the whole bike will jerk from those powerful heads and let you know it's getting ready to go down the road. Is it a fast bike? Not particularly. 91 horsepower is more than enough. I prefer the low-end torque, much like I do on my Harleys. None of my Harleys are speed demons. And I prefer that low-end torque to dig my way out of the corners when I'm carving up the roads. The transmission on this bike is like butter. I'm not kidding you. Why Harley can't learn their lesson. And their hydraulic clutch is amazingly easy to pull. Harley-Davidsons are the worst of any bike I've ever ridden. It's like pulling an anvil to pulling a clutch on a Harley. So, and I use that as a broad statement. I include the hydraulic Harley clutches as well as the cable. They're both terrible. How's the handling of the bike? Well, the suspension is much like a softtail. You have very short suspension on the rear end of the bike. If you hit a pothole, the bike is very stable. It is not unnerved at all and tracks fine going down the road. However, that hit to the bike sends that shock right up to the rider, so that is less than desirable. Is this bike suspension on par with Harley-Davidson from an old school Harley rider? The answer is not entirely. To put a numeric value on it, let's take the Heritage Softail, which is kind of the best of the softtails in Harley-Davidson. This suspension is about 80% of that bike. Now, if you go to the different variations of the soft tails, then this suspension starts to catch up, and I would say it's 90%. It's still not bad. I haven't really adjusted it much, so those are my statements this far, 600 miles into it. Pricing structure, I want to talk about this a second, and one of the main reasons why I bought this bike. The base boned out model is $16,790. The first edition platform starts at $18,190, and when you add up those option packages that I went over, this one books out for $22,265. Is that in line with the soft tails and some of the Harleys? Yeah, somewhere in the middle. Is it going to sway a Harley rider away from buying Harley Davidson? Most likely not. I would say 90% of the time, no, they're going to buy a Harley unless they get pissed off with the Moco slapping them around, then they'll go try something else. And that's happening daily. So is this a viable option? Yes, I do believe it is. I like naked bikes. My father put it best as a pilot. He said, I like a naked bike because in front of me I have no dashboard, no windshield, I have air. And I feel like I'm floating when I'm going down the road. It's a different experience. That comes at a cost with wind blast. If you're going down the road at 70 miles an hour, your taco shape that you can form on the bike becomes a wind sail and you're fighting to stay on the bike. So if I had to travel across country on this bike, yeah, I would put a windshield on the front. Hopefully that's quick detached so I can pull it off. So is this bike made for cross-country riding? Many people have said no. I beg to differ. I would say yes. I would ride this across country. Hell, I've ridden a scooter across country, so I'm kind of the village idiot in that regard. This bike will do just fine and serve you well taking you across country. It's happier on scenic highways than it is grinding on a freeway with expansion gaps on the freeway going da-dun-da-dun-da-dun. It's going to beat you to death going down that road. It's not fun on any bike on that type of road, but this one in particular is more designed for Route 66, Pacific Coast Highway, that type of riding, in my opinion. Let's go back to the pricing for just a second. If you check Cycle Trader, there's some very handsome deals on these bikes out there. Bottom line, they're not selling on BMW's showroom. So there is heavy incentives from the factory on this bike. One of the big digs on this bike is it doesn't have cruise control. And do I think that's a mistake? Yes, I do. Can I live without it? Yes, I can. Now, I think a batch of these bikes were press release bikes and all set up the exact same way. I would prefer not to have the pinion seat. Just like my Y Glide, I don't want to ride anybody back there. It would be painful for the rider to ride on this thing, as it would be on the Breakout or the Y Glide. So these bikes are collecting dust on the showroom, and BMW has enhanced them tremendously. You will see them advertised in the $15,000 price range. And to add for bonus points, BMW has a program for 0.9% financing based on your good credit. Yes, that's cheap money, less than 1%. But here's the kicker. They'll pay up to the first 6 payments. Up to $333 for the first 6 payments. If you adjust the term of your contractual agreement with BMW Bank Financial Services, you can optimize those 6 payments, and that net will get you another $2,000 off. So roughly, I paid somewhere in the high 12s to 13 grand for this bike. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can't buy a Sportster for that kind of money. You cannot discount an 1800cc boxer motor for that kind of money. That makes it an outstanding deal. There's still deals out there. If you would like to try one, I strongly recommend you go ride one and try it out. And if you're willing to travel the next state over to find that good deal like I did, then it is well worth your time and money to get a hell of a lot of bike for the money. I normally don't discuss pricing on my channel, but this one was the exception to the rule. So what resonates with this behemoth of a bike to me? The size, it's freaking huge. It is such a pleasure to ride this giant bike down the road. And as a big person, it's such a pleasure to fit on a giant bike for once, instead of looking like a circus clown on a trike, like I normally look on most motorcycles, or I have my entire life. Acceleration, braking, we'll dig into more details on that on some ride reviews of this particular bike, and I'll dig down into the weeds on those items. So this is just painting with a wide brush, and a brief overview of my initial reaction and walk around. The main gripes against this bike are no cruise control, no forward controls, no way to stretch your legs out, suspension is a little edgy, and the detuned motor down to 91 horsepower. As I said, most BMW enthusiasts are expecting a much stronger platform to kind of give them a Triumph Speed Triple experience. That's not what this bike is all about. If you want the Triumph Speed Trip, you have the need for speed, move along. This bike isn't for you. It has 3 ride modes, which they call rock, roll, and rain. I don't agree with BMW's branding and marketing of this bike using a quip like rock and roll. Rock is the full-blown, get full access to all the horsepower and torque the bike has to offer. Roll offers somewhere in the middle, it kind of tapered down. And then of course rain mode is tapered way down so you're not breaking loose traction on wet roads. Again, I don't agree with the branding and marketing of that. It's kind of amateurish or sophomoric in my opinion. But I get it, they're trying to have a little bit of fun with the bike. Yes, I have tried all 3 modes. Yes, they all work wonderful. As always with BMW, they nail it when they put their time and energy and research and development into anything. The rock mode is where I will live 99.9% of the time. If I get caught in the rain, then I will kick it down to the rain mode. I will give BMW props. You are able to change the mode going down the road instead of having to pull over and stop and then change your ride mode. So props to them on that one. Another dig on the bike is the speedometer and the information that it provides in the liquid crystal display readout down below. You have RPM, you have trip 1, trip 2. There is no gas gauge. I'll talk about gas gauge in just a second, and you have things like your miles per gallon in real time, which seems like useless information. And why would BMW put that on there? Well, I can tell you why. What they're tapping in that speedometer is into what they call the OBD, onboard diagnostic. That's a service port that the service tech can plug in to get codes when there's error codes or problems with the bike to help diagnose the issue and get it repaired. That information is being displayed in the speedometer in partial that BMW felt it would be useful to the consumer. Am I a fan of that information? No, I could care less. The only thing I need is a trip meter and the odometer, and I'm good. Now, regarding the no gas gauge, you have to ask yourself, folks, is your gas gauge accurate on your motorcycle? Yes, there will be that guy and gal out there that says, yes, mine is dead nuts on. It's all of it in a bag of chips. At the end of the day, you have a 4.2 gallon tank with gas sloshing around. That floats, that's measuring it, is going up and down, trying to measure where your gas is at. On most of my bikes that I've had with gas gauges, I'll fill it up, I'll ride like 60, 70 miles, and then wham, a third of it drops out. It's not very accurate. I mean, it's almost a joke, in my opinion, to have a gas gauge on a motorcycle. I do it old school way. I just ride when I get close to 140 miles. That's about where my light comes on for gas. I know I gotta pull over and get gas. End of story. That's the way I roll, and that's pretty much the way I roll with all my bikes. I don't really count on the gas gauge, unless you just need that visual appeal of seeing a needle bumping against the E. Use your tripometer. Game over. Not a big deal. I enclosed some B-roll to kind of give you a feel or flavor for the bike. My gosh, look at the size of that exhaust coming off the head. Look at the size of the heads when you sit on the bike. The first thing you see is a beautifully shaped tank, and there's just enough chrome. Speedometer is centered perfectly right in front of the headlight, and it gives you what I feel is one of the most handsome views from the cockpit of any bike ever made. That's quite a statement, but I'm allowed to make that statement. I've ridden quite a few bikes. I'll throw some pictures up of the concept vehicle. I wish they had stuck a little closer to the roots of the concept vehicle. If and when I get to messing with this bike, that's the direction I'm going to march in. Depends on if I can get the parts from Europe and ship them over here. So we'll see. The fishtail mufflers, they're bulbous, they're a little robust for my taste. Again, when you look at that concept vehicle, that was the direction I would prefer, but I understand to meet Euro emissions 5, I believe it is, They have to go with something more robust, so it is what it is. I do enjoy the visual feel of it. When you start this bike, the whole bike rocks to the side because of those giant pistons just punching their way to life. It puts a grin on my face every time. This bike has loads of character. Anybody that rides a Moto Guzzi knows what I'm talking about. This isn't a hate on Honda, but I'll make this statement regarding character. This bike has it in spades, 100% character. The last Honda that I bought was seamless. It did everything it was supposed to do perfectly. It was like a sewing machine going down the road. It just hummed and did everything flawlessly. It left me stone cold. When I got off the bike and walked away, I was like, it just left me I wasn't smiling about my experience on the bike. I think you have to have some shake, rattle, and roll to have some character with Kraken and his relationship with the bike. I have loads of character. I have a load of a relationship to build with this bike, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Some styling cues, if you take a look at the front forks, they kind of taper out, and they have this shroud to kind of give it that old school look back from the 30s, which I think is beautiful. I really, really enjoy the wire wheels, but that's me. What are Kraken's thoughts on this bike? I think BMW hit the ball out of the park. I think they killed it on this bike. I think they made some mistakes on their marketing with the rock and roll ride modes. They made mistakes going after the Harley crowd with Roland Sands making the accessories. You can get different brushed aluminum or blacked out engine covers to get rid of the chrome and things like that. I don't agree with that marketing. I agree with having the options, but I don't agree using or borrowing 100% Harley-based engineered developers for aftermarket products for this bike. The seats that are offered by BMW are made by Mustang seats, again, primarily a Harley seat-based company. BMW, you have 100 years of heritage and your own DNA and your own story to tell. You don't need to borrow Harleys to go after that. Come up with your own. Do your own designs in Germany and bring them to North America and make it a European experience. Don't make it a European bike and then pretend to be an American experience. That's my humble opinion. Does Kraken recommend this bike at this short juncture in my relationship with this beast? 100% yes. It is an absolute joy to ride. It is such a rhinoceros of a bike. It is such a visceral ride this bike and enjoy what it brings to the table. It is a totally different experience. Let's say I didn't have my Icon Revival and I was shopping for a new bike. Would I buy this one or the Icon? Hands down, I would buy my Revival. That is my mile muncher and my full-time bike that I will ride year-round in winter, weather protection, things like that. This is a different bike, much like my Y-Glide, and this is one that I still will ride year-round, but not so much in inclement weather. It is a different riding experience, much like riding the Roadster or the Vespa. If you have different bikes in your garage, they are different tools for different jobs, and this one provides an experience that I will enjoy as long as I own this bike. So those are my initial thoughts. I've addressed some of the negative comments I've heard about this bike and the pushback I've heard from people on it, and I'll dig further in those issues when I get down the road. This is just shotgunning it and hitting it with a broad brush, to kind of hit the hot spots and give a brief talk. We'll drill down on the individual issues one at a time. Do the heads cook my feet? Do I have enough leg room? Blah, blah, blah. We'll cover all of that in the near future, so I hope you enjoyed today's episode and my initial thoughts of this beautiful, beautiful bike that I happen to love. And there's my Ghost Dog Bourbon. He's here to remind me to wrap things up. If you would like to become a Patreon, the link is listed down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you want to see more in the future, hit that subscribe button right down there in the corner. And remember, folks, go riding. It's good for you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.